If there is one thing that BioWare can't patch for Mass Effect Andromeda, it's the piss-poor writing. It's just too deeply ingrained in the game's core DNA. And reworking the writing would mean having to rework things like the cutscene, the story, the sequence of events, and a bunch of other things that would just be too much work for the potential returns that such an endeavor would offer. Some of the dialogue in this game in particular can be downright awful, often killing the mood of what should be intense or emotional scenes. So in this video, I want to focus on what about Mass Effect Andromeda's dialogue yields this effect. From what I've noticed, I would say that the main culprit is that the way the dialogue is written makes it seem like nobody is taking their job seriously. It just feels like everyone's fucking around and don't really understand the stakes of what's happening here. The plot of the game revolves around the Andromeda Initiative, which is humanity's attempt to essentially migrate to an entire new galaxy and find new planets to call home. But along the way, just about everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong. They find that the planets that should have been habitable are anything but. Their first contact with Andromeda's aliens has been hostile. Many of the initiative's leaders perished early on. There are large chunks of the initiative's population that is unaccounted for, and the list just goes on and on. So not only is the Andromeda Initiative a massive and ambitious endeavor, the situation that they find themselves in is dire, to say the least. So you'd think that all of the important personnel would be laser focused on the task at hand. You'd think that everyone would be on edge on some level and recognize that there is very little time to fuck around. They have to be on top of their game if they wish to survive. So given the circumstances that Mass Effect Andromeda drops you in, it's a big problem when many of the game's key characters, the protagonist and the squad mates in particular, come off as amateurs who seem to think this is all some kind of fun road trip where nothing needs to be taken seriously.
I think I really pissed that one off. Maybe because I shot him in the face.
I'm all for characters expressing a sense of wonder. They're exploring a new galaxy. That's an exciting venture for sure. But there's also a lot on the line here. So when the characters are constantly throwing puns, jokes, one-liners, and smart-ass remarks left and right, you start losing the sense that there's actually a lot at stake here.
Besides establishing our first viable outpost, we did some amazing things. We discovered the Remnant and breached their vault.
And didn't get killed.
Overcame radiation poisoning a number of times.
And didn't die.
Confronted by Ket at every turn.
Once again, did not get killed.
As a result, it's hard to take the story's premise of having to find a new home in uncharted, dangerous lands very seriously. My favorite character in the game is probably Ryder Sr. That's because he's probably the most well-written, well-performed, and all-around well-rounded character in the whole game. Even though we don't get to see much of this character, what is there is absolutely fantastic, and it's that kind of treatment that all of the other characters should have gotten. In the game's opening hours, just from Ryder Sr.'s general demeanor and dialogue, you get the sense that he fully understands how serious and monumental of a task migrating to another galaxy is.
Captain, the protocol's clear. In the absence of communication with the Nexus or the other arcs, we proceed to our appointed Golden World. Solid ground.
You feel like he's actually taking his role as Pathfinder very, very seriously, as he should. All of Ryder Sr.'s lines, particularly when shit hits the fan, have a sense of urgency and gravitas to them.
My father's got a point, though. Solid ground sounding pretty good right now.
Yeah, but...
Pretty good. Isn't good enough.
Yes, sir.
And I think that the speech he gives in the game's intro is utterly fantastic and beautifully sets up the mood for what should have been the rest of the game.
We are, all of us, leaving behind families, homes, the very birthplace of our species. Whatever our reasons, we take the first steps toward a new future for humanity. Today, we begin to make our dream reality.
Everything about Ryder Sr. just feels spot on in the context of the the circumstances that the game presents from the get-go. But then once the game gets started and introduces some of the other key characters, it's like they're going out of their way to completely undo the mood and the tone that the game's intro establishes. Again, it feels like many of the game's key characters, besides Ryder Sr., just don't give a fuck. And it's like they're constantly competing for who can make the most clever remarks for any given situation.
Hard to believe we're finally doing this. Sure beats reading the brochures.
Well, Crazy just found us. Those rocks out there are floating. Welcome to Habitat 7!
What the hell is that?
It's not a hotel, that's for sure. New galaxy, new ways to die.
In many respects, the writing and dialogue in this game feel like a sitcom, but the game doesn't even succeed in that regard. Characters' remarks just aren't funny or clever. There are so many lines in this game that sound like they could have been pulled straight out of a poorly written sitcom.
The atmospheric sensor is still working. Let me guess. It says don't breathe the air? Same language as those aliens. Wonder what he's saying.
Kill all humans, probably?
Since when do rocks float?
Just go with him!
Liam, enough.
Right, sorry. I get a little pissed when people are trying to kill me.
The result is a game that, from the get-go, tells you just how much is at stake, but continues to progressively go out of its way to make you forget about the stakes. All the dialogue in Mass Effect Andromeda feels counterintuitive to what the narrative is trying to achieve. And look, I'm all for casual banter and characters joking around, but the situation has to call for it. I happen to think that Andromeda's best dialogue can be found in the more casual scenarios. You know, when things have calmed down and characters actually have time to sit down and talk and have fun. The cheesy dialogue that Andromeda offers actually lends itself pretty well to these types of scenarios. The problem is that characters always feel like they stay there in that casual mode, even when shit gets real. And it just ruins what could have been some really fantastic, intense, or emotional moments. On top of all this are the straight up awful, infamous lines that are woefully unnatural for any human being to say.
Nice to see some friendly faces.
Hungry faces. Sorry, my face is tired from dealing with everything.
I prefer to eat lunch, not be lunch.
Package all of these problems together and you've got a story-driven game that constantly takes you out of the story. And don't even get me started with the general lack of emotional resonance in this game. The most prevalent example of this is towards the beginning of the game, when Ryder seems to show little to no emotions for the fact that their father had just perished.
You're not Alec Ryder.
My father's dead. He made me his successor.
In fact, I can almost swear that Ryder smiles at the thought or mention of this tragedy.
Alec is dead.
None of it intentional, but immersion-breaking nonetheless. And I mean, this is really unfortunate because even if they did fix the facial animations and the game's bugs, that doesn't change the fact that many of these characters' actions and dialogue don't correspond to the reality of the present situation. Characters are just too happy-go-lucky all the time, and when they do try to express some semblance of emotion, it all just kind of falls flat on its face due to a combination of poorly animated faces, poorly written lines, and poor delivery by the actors who play these characters.
Could be worse.
How? Habitat 7's a bust. We might have started a war with the first aliens we met, and our Pathfinder's dead. This better be rock bottom.
I don't know if it was the voice actor's fault, the voice director's fault, the writing's fault, a combination of all three, but more often than not, I found the performances in this game to be generally lacking and poor. There are a handful of characters who are consistently performed well. Ryder Sr. and Veteran Nix come to mind, but many of the prevalent characters, like the protagonist, Ryder, both male and female, are all over the place. I would say that PB in particular is one of the most poorly performed, poorly written, and downright insufferable characters in the entire game. I would even argue that many of her characters' dialogue and your interactions with her highlight all of the problems with Andromeda's writing and dialogue.
Wait!
Back up, literally. Back up, literally. Back up, literally.
You've come this far. Just let it ride. I know. Who am I?
You're for real, huh? Maybe you want to knock me down a couple more times to make sure.
Oh, crap. But that's too long. Ugh, I hate long. So, the Remnant. Like, my name's better as Peepee. You're a mystery. I've been studying those glyphs for months, and then you arrive and solved. Solved. Solved.
Just imagine Dora the Explorer was born an Asari and grew up to be a rebel wannabe, and you've got PB in a nutshell.
First one gets the glory.
Now, some could argue that that's just the way the character is, but that doesn't mean that I have to like the character, or that the character isn't insufferable, or that she doesn't fit well given the high stakes of the situation. But long story short, all these problems with writing, dialogue, and performance just results in a game that I can rarely take seriously. And this game isn't a sitcom. This is a game that wants to be taken seriously, but makes it really hard to do that. And I mean, there's just so much potential with Andromeda's premise. This idea of humanity setting out to find a new home in another galaxy, that's a compelling idea right there. But again, the game just goes out of its way to diminish the stakes that are involved. The Andromeda Initiative just feels like a game from all these characters' perspective, rather than a mission that will change humanity as we know it.
I don't see any champagne. If it's a surprise party, they're doing an awfully good job of it.
At least things like facial animations can be fixed with a patch, but when it comes to the writing, there's no fixing that. That's what the game was built around. So when the core is rotten, the whole package might as well be rotten as well. And that's what pisses me off about this whole situation. The one thing that they couldn't afford to fuck up, the writing, which is so pivotal to this game, which is what the whole game was shaped around, is the thing that they fucked up most royally. It honestly boggles my mind that a group of professional writers sat in a room, wrote all these piss-poor jokes, one-liners, and remarks, and shoehorned downright inhuman lines as well, and looked at all this and said, yeah, this is gonna work. The facial animations are the most visually noticeable problems, and they are a big problem that does serve to break immersion, but the piss-poor writing and dialogue are absolutely fatal to the whole experience, and it cannot be fixed. So if you're one of those people who is still on the fence about Mass Effect Andromeda, you're waiting until all of the patches fix the game's problems, but are more looking for great writing and whatnot, just don't bother with this game. The damage is done, the core is rotten, and there's just nothing they can do about that. The best we can hope for right now is that EA and BioWare will learn from this experience and strive towards making Mass Effect Andromeda 2, if that project is in the works, something that people will be happy with, something that's polished, something that understands how important immersion is in a story-driven experience like this. With that, I would like to end this Mass Effect Andromeda discussion video. Thank you for tuning in. What do you think? Do you agree with what I have to say about the writing and dialogue, or do you have an entirely different opinion? Let us know in the comments below, and to be further updated on further video game news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!